Okay, Jason. So let's start with everyone's favorite subject, taxes. Why did you want to talk about taxes today?
Taxes. Well, actually, what spurred this was, we invented the retirement budget calculator. We have a lot of people out there using it. A few of those people have reached out to me and said, Jason, we've been using the retirement budget calculator. We love it, but we'd love to get a second opinion and just make sure we're not missing anything here. And so in almost every instance, when I've looked at the data that people have entered, they have grossly underestimated taxes. So one of the reasons I want to talk about taxes, for all of our listeners out there that are trying the retirement budget calculator, go back, double check your inputs. Remember, the calculator is not automatically making those calculations for you. You have to put a dollar amount in for what you estimate your taxes to be. And where people are really messing this up, Emilia, they're getting it pretty accurate for what they're doing today if they're still working, because they're just looking at how much is being withheld from their paycheck. But where they're messing it up is when the required minimum distributions start at 70. So just to start out with a big warning to everybody that's using the retirement budget calculator to make sure that you're really thinking about the future tax consequences, because we're not doing that in that tool. The second thing I want to say before we start digging into taxes too deeply here is to remember that taxes are kind of like fingerprints. They're going to be very specific and unique to you. So we're going to talk in general terms today about taxes, but people just need to be careful because these hypothetical scenarios I create may not look anything like their actual financial picture. So you really need to look at taxes on a one-on-one basis. And then I think that's it. Oh, and the last thing is I just want to remind people, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. So you've heard this say, don't let the tail wag the dog. Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that things are optimized. We want to be thinking about taxes, but we don't want to base our entire financial life, a retirement plan, on taxes alone. Retirement's an exercise in cash flow. If you do tax planning because you want to pay less money in taxes, but that strategy causes you to run out of money early in retirement, then it could, that is a really bad strategy if you run out of money, right? Yes. So we can't make everything about taxes. We want to consider taxes, but the very first and most important thing is understand your spending and make sure you have good cash flow coming in to solve for that expense.
Okay. So were you going to go over any of the other details this morning about tax planning, or we're good?
Oh, no. I've got all kinds of good stuff here on taxes.
All right.
I guess we need to set the stage first when we talk about taxes in the context of the overall environment that we're in. So remember, 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day in our country. And the two of the top items on our nation's budget is Medicare and Social Security. So as people transition into retirement, they're going to want more of those benefits. And that's a big line item on our nation's budget. So a lot of people heading into retirement. Now, the second part of this is our national debt right now is currently over $22 trillion. $22 trillion. Hard to imagine what that means. Well, actually, let me put it in perspective. So if you were to give away $1 million a day, it would take you 2,700 years to give away $1 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, we're $22 trillion into this thing. But the crazy thing is the debt's continuing to grow. So right now, we're estimating, the estimate is that we're spending about $1 trillion more. We have a budget deficit of $1 trillion. So the debt of $22 trillion is going to continue to grow right now at about $1 trillion a year. So keep that in your mind. So we've got baby boomers, we've got national debt, the debt's growing. And then we saw we have right now some of the lowest tax rates in the history of our country, both individual tax rates and corporate tax rates. And this tax reduction came about as a result of a Republican-held House, a Republican-held Senate, and a Republican-held president. And what was interesting is I did some research and I said, how many Democrats voted in favor of those tax cuts? And what I found was there wasn't one. Not one Democrat voted in favor of those tax cuts. Now, why is that important and relevant? Because we don't want to get into a discussion about people's politics. But why it's important is because we have an election on the horizon. Some people think, and it's, the last couple of elections have really been nail biters in terms of the results. So some people think there could be a change in leadership in Congress. And if there is a change in leadership, given this just the situation our country's in right now, is it possible that tax rates could be going up in the future? And nobody knows for sure. That's what we call public policy risk. But it's certainly something worth thinking about as we start to talk about taxes and tax planning for retirement.
Yeah. So, Jason, armed with this, what should we be thinking about right now?
Okay, yeah. So first of all, there are people out there that are still maybe 5 years from retirement, and I'm going to share a couple of ideas that I want them to be thinking about specifically, and they'll understand why when we start to get into this scenario that I created. But if you're 5 years out from retirement, a couple of things you want to be thinking about. Number one is if you're in good health, consider doing a high deductible health insurance program so that you can make contributions to a health savings account, an HSA. Now, an HSA is different than some of these other different types of medical savings accounts out there. An HSA is something that you don't have to spend every year. You get a tax deduction for contributing to it, kind of like it works similar to an IRA, but then the money comes out tax-free if it's used for healthcare benefits. So if we have a little bit of a runway, let's start building up, and you're healthy, let's start building up that HSA. You're going to get tax benefits now for making the contributions, and then we're going to have some tax-free money to work with when you get to retirement. So that's for people that have a couple of years. The other thing that I think people should be thinking about, Emilia, are there a lot of people today are contributing to their 401k, their TSP, their IRAs, and those are all tax-deferred vehicles. So back in the 1970s, when those things all came about, it made sense that people were putting as much money into those accounts as possible because the top tax rate in our country at the time was over 70%. But right now, because we have these all-time low tax rates, people might want to consider starting to if they have a 401k Roth at their employer, instead of putting it into the traditional 401k or the traditional TSP, making the contributions to the Roth side of the equation in an environment that we're in now where taxes are low. If they don't have the Roth available to them, we always want people to be contributing to the 401k to make sure they're getting the full match from their employer because that's free money. We don't want everyone to leave free money on the table. But if they don't have the Roth available to them, they might want to consider doing individual Roth accounts on their own, not through a 401k, or even worst case scenario, maybe just starting to build up that non-qualified bucket of money. So individual accounts. So again, just accepting that you're going to pay a little bit more money in taxes today, but you're going to do it in a tax environment that's really low. So that's for the people that are within 5 years of retirement. Max out the HSA if you're not doing that. Get some tax-free money for health care working for you, and then start diversifying those future tax liabilities by considering the Roth 401k or the Roth IRA or even a non-qualified individual account. And with this next scenario, I'm going to explain why you might want to be thinking those things.
Great. Here we go.
Okay. So the scenario that I wanted to build was I wanted to say, what if we had a married couple who was 60 years old and they wanted to retire? And they had done a pretty good job saving for retirement. They had about $500,000 in individual non-qualified accounts, meaning they were $500,000 not in retirement accounts. And then they had another $1 million in retirement accounts. And so I ran the scenario 3 different ways. I said, okay, what if starting at age 60, in every single one of these scenarios, we're going to assume they don't start Social Security until age 70. But what I was trying to understand was if we took the money needed, so in this case, we're saying they needed they were totally debt-free. They felt if they had $60,000 a year or $5,000 a month that they could live pretty comfortably from 60 to 70 in retirement. So the question became, well, which account are we going to pull money out of first? And I looked at, okay, we could take the money, the $60,000 a year from non-qualified accounts, but does that make the most sense in this all-time low interest or tax environment? Or we could flip it and we could say, let's take our distributions from our IRAs first and then save that non-qualified money for the future when tax rates may be higher. And then the third scenario I said is, what if we took our distributions from our non-qualified accounts first, postponed taking the money out of the IRA, but during those 10 years where the income was low, we converted $25,000 a year to Roth.